build my gallows and build them high. Makes a long time climbing before I die. I want the chance. Hello everybody, welcome to Longbangers. I'm Matty.
I'm John.
How's it going, John?
I'm all right. I was a wee bit unwell yesterday with one of those viral things that you never really get to the bottom of, and I've still got a
Hibs.
little bit of a sore throat. So, if I start getting croaky or start needing to clear my throat, I apologise. But I'm doing this. I should really have phoned in sick when you think about it.
Yeah. I don't
Can we do that now? Now that we've gone pro?
Yeah, I think so. I think you can phone in sick, although then I'd have to do the back to work interview and all that kind of stuff after it, and it would bring a level of formality that I don't think this podcast requires, John.
How do you phone in sick for something that requires you to talk when I can clearly talk?
Just like a heavy breathing down the phone.
Well, I might get told a story once about someone phoning in sick once. I think it's one of my mates who's a manager, and the boy, I don't know, like I think he'd hurt his leg or something, but he had that croaky voice on. Like, okay, so like your leg's bad. What's that going to do with your voice?
Why have you done that with your mentally? Folk do that all the time just to make it sound authentic. Right, I think I would rather have phoned in sick for this one, given I wish I'd phoned in sick instead of going to the football. That is my takeaway for the day, John. Was the game was so bad and Hibs were so bad that not only do I wish I'd phoned in sick for it, I would rather have been genuinely sick, like with a reason, not like phoning a sickie when you're all right, but actual illness would have been preferable to watching that game today.
You know how some players get concussed during football games, and they go off, like there's the famous or infamous John Lambie story where I forget who the player was, but he came off and they said, "Oh, he doesn't know who he is. We'll tell him he's Pele and get him back out there."
Aye.
Would you have preferred concussion and not being able to remember today's game, or
Yeah.
having not seen the game at all?
I'd rather have not seen it at all. Do you know, like last week, I'm thinking back to last week, watching us struggle against St Mirren for 70 minutes, thinking this is one of the worst performances I've ever seen us put in. And that was better than today. Like we had Dylan Vente had a shot, not Dylan Vente, Dylan Levitt had a shot in the first half. It was a half-hour shot. It went wide. That was it.
I remember that, actually, glad you mentioned it.
And then our next attempt on goal wasn't until an hour into the game where Doige had a crappy wee header onto the top of the net.
Mm-hmm.
And then our first shot on target, I think, came with a penalty in injury time.
So that's three interesting points that you make, because despite the game only having finished just over 3 hours ago, I think the game was that boring for me. And the chat amongst the fans on Twitter and what have you since then, it's kind of overshadowed it. You forget those little moments. But I was having a look at the stats for the game, and I saw that we had one shot on target, and I thought, fuck, that must have been the penalty.
Mm-hmm. Aye,
which
in
is quite
injury
shite.
time, yeah. Their keeper could have almost have taken the day off. Like we were that.
Could have phoned in sick.
He could have phoned in sick. Aye, didn't fancy it today, Gaffer. No worries for playing Hibs. I wish I could get to the bottom of it, John. Right, so there is like a very obvious conclusion, right? That if you look at the message board that I went on Hibs.net after, I've not looked on the bounce yet, and overwhelming. Like the finger of blame is pointing overwhelmingly at Lee Johnson for it, as it does. However, I did predict.
Why is that?
Well, it's a funny thing, right? I say funny as in peculiar, right? Not a ha ha. After Thursday night, which was brilliant, right? Thursday night, brilliant. Performance, brilliant. Everything about Thursday was brilliant, right? Really, really enjoyed it. Better Hibs net, there's a Lee Johnson out thread, right? And I posted on there and I just said, like, because folk were kind of gloating that the people who were saying she get rid of Lee Johnson are wrong, and look, we've got this great performance and maybe you need to think again. And I was like, Lee Johnson, like, things are so bad that the next defeat, which is likely today, is going to see it all kick off again. Like, a win only quietens that noise for that immediate game. And then as soon as the next bad thing happens, it's like, fucking this explosion of get him out, get him out, get him out. And I'm not necessarily criticising that, by the way, because you watch a game like today and last week and you just think, why would you put yourself through that? And he's in charge of it, and he's been there long enough now that shouldn't be happening. But I still don't care if I'd advocate sacking him. It's mental, John. I don't care how he's managed to get so many people so conflicted with their viewpoint on him. What do you think?
It's maybe one of his strengths when you think about it.
Well, maybe.
Can I just say, when I asked you why is that, for the benefit of people listening rather than viewing, I said that very firmly, tongue in cheek, and I was laughing as I said it. And thank you for your answer. So, sorry, to summarise your question there, Matty, what was it? Because you talked for a wee bit, and I'm known for forgetting.
How does he manage to make people conflicted? Because there are still people who are defending Lee Johnson, and am I one of them? I don't know, John. I honestly don't know where I stand with him at the minute.
Is Lee Johnson a manager like a player that you see something in but never quite shows it regular enough or brings it to the surface enough? So someone like, say, Slivka when he played for Hibs. I was a fan of Slivka when he played for Hibs, but there was the criticism kind of followed him around that didn't he show it often enough? Didn't he display it week to week? But I guess that's the only comparison you can really make between the two. Lee Johnson has had some good wins. There's been some good performances.
Yeah.
There's been streaks of victories under him. He also managed to get Hibs to 5th last year, albeit the teams ahead of us were kind of a bit topsy-turvy in terms of form. The flip side of it is that we've had, I wouldn't necessarily call them disasters, they've certainly been shit results, but you've had bookends of performances either side of what was a really good performance in Europe. That for me is why it's so conflicting, because you see the possibilities. And I think we talked about it on Friday after the European game, that if we could get that performance every week, or even close to that performance every week, we would be a very good team. Mm-hmm. The danger is that you're going to have a St Mirren or a Motherwell. Yeah. How does it can't just be a case of, and I don't know how we do it, because I'm sure I referenced this as well. We have had so many instances of so many managers as Hibs fans where we've had a really good performance and have got a result that we weren't expected to get, and we followed up with something draws. In fact, I think the example that I gave was Matty Jack, AEK Athens, followed by a 1-0 defeat to Livingston. Mm-hmm. This isn't a one-off. This happens with football, with Hibs managers, and I don't know how to resolve that.
I don't know either. Right, so let's take it away, Rick. So I'm conscious we did a whole extra time on Lee Johnson last week, and I also don't want to really be that podcast that just flip flops on him after every result. You know, like we win, keep him, we lose, sack him. I don't think that's like a healthy way to look at the situation, and is very reactionary and knee-jerk reactionary, which I don't think is really us. So if we step back for Lee Johnson for a minute, right, and we might come back to him, we probably will come back to him. What was it? Is it as easy as saying it's a European hangover, John? Is it as simple as saying Thursday night took a load out of us and we just couldn't get up for it today?
When you say European hangover, how would you define that?
Like the effort, right? And Lee Johnson mentioned this in his post-match interview, that he said that the game on Thursday night was Hibs' hardest. I can't remember the exact phrase, right? But basically what he was implying was that when all the things that they measure, right, which would be like number of sprints, distances run and everything, mm-hmm. that was like the max for his time there. That was the one that hit it was like number one for all these things. So the amount of effort expended in getting that result mm-hmm. on Thursday night,
So
I,
using the Will Fish being chased by a lion example, Will Fish was performing at close
close.
to or on his maximum on Thursday, but perhaps wasn't today.
Yeah, but where the hangover bit comes in, right, is that there's not just the physical exertion there, right? But you have like that high after it, right? Because we had it as fans, to the point where we couldn't wait to talk about it the next day. Like, let's get an
Mm-hmm.
episode out, and we wanted to talk about it. I wanted to absorb as much. I wanted to like watch the game after it, like again, rewatch it, see what happened online, to see what the reaction is. As a player, it must be hard to come down for that as well. And then when they come out today, they've had that physical and emotional exertion on Thursday, and it's maybe because it is alien to Hibs still at this point to do like a European night bread and butter league game, European night bread and butter league game, and we've seen like both times like so St Mirren on the back a bit like a in inverted commas a big European night. Right? It's a big performance in Europe where we beat the Escalades. Um, Lose to St Mirren, beat Luzerne, lose to Motherwell. Is it that we haven't learned to cope with that yet? Do you think?
It's possible. So I'm trying to think back to our previous European outings. So who do we have? We had Santa Coloma, and then we had Rijeka. And when we had Rijeka, was that still COVID? Was that still during COVID times?
No, I don't think so because I think the beginning was score over there and went celebrating with Hibs
That
fans.
was that was Tripolice.
Oh, so it was.
And I'm trying to remember Rijeka if there was fans in the stadium. But I mean, I don't think, or I don't know if fans would have made a difference. But I'm thinking about taking into account what might encompass that European hangover. So you're talking about um, energy levels. You might talk about um, tension, excitement, adrenaline levels, all that sort of
Mhm.
stuff. Um, Players feeding off the crowd would surely play an impact on that. So you go from say 15,000 under the lights Thursday night European fixture at Easter Road, Fir Park, less people,
Six
less
thousand.
Hibs fans. That might play an impact. So what I was trying to work out was, are any of the players that were playing for Hibs during the Rijeka game still playing today? Are they able to take that sort of knowledge forward? Because I think I mentioned in one of the in Friday's game about being more street smart with regards to the referees in these European games because we got caught out by that. So John Yo got sent off in an early game. Um, Darren McGregor got sent off against
Mm-hmm.
Rijeka, and I thought that we'd learned from that, but maybe there's more that we can learn from in Europe with regards to some of these sort of softer factors, if you like.
Yeah, I need to be careful to make it clear that I'm not excusing that. Like I'm not saying that this
No,
is
no,
like it's okay for that to happen, right? You try to when you get a performance like today, you try to like pinpoint the root cause of it, right? And there is the whole was it Occam's razor, where the simplest answer is usually the right one.
yeah, yeah,
So I mean, your simple answer there is tactics. Tactics were wrong. Team selection was wrong, and the personnel weren't good enough. Right? That's the obvious answer. But I think there is more to it, and I think um, it could be that the manager's trying to learn how to cope with the Sunday Thursday as well, because he wanted to rotate the team, and he mentioned that he had six players out. And I don't know who the six players that he was bringing in for today were. If uh, if he was
I think
rotating
there may have been a little creative accounting with that. Shout out to Ryan for bringing that to our attention.
Aye, I thought so as well because I was like, right, and he mentioned Campbell and Doyle Hayes, which is your two central midfielders. I think Jago would have started anyway, so we would have had a different midfield than we started with today. I think definitely Boyle wasn't meant to play today under medical advice, but had to play 45 minutes according to Johnson. But there is another point to say. Well, we're right at the start of the season. These are young, fit men, right? Surely they can cope with a Sunday, Thursday. For like at the start of the season, when the pitches are good, the weather's good, it's not like they're having to slog through like a fucking Tattyfield in November with the pish
Yeah,
and rain and all the rest of it. is he not giving the players enough credit by wanting to protect them like that? Should he have just gone, well, use are the team, you need to go and do it? And I think back to, like, see if you go back to Alex Miller, for example, right? When we played in Europe under him, you could name 1 to 11 the Hibs team because it was the same every week. Hibs squad was totally, you had the same starting 11 every week, more or less, right? It wasn't like we rotated and had a big squad. It was just like, okay, Graham Mitchell was your left back, Gordon Hunter was your centre half, and Mickey Weir was in midfield, and Keith Wright was up front with Darren Jackson, or whatever era it was. The same 1 to 11 more or less played. If we played a Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, or a Sunday, Thursday, whatever it was, the players just played, and they played when before, like, modern football where teams operated with a big squad. They went with the same 11 more or less all season. Like, why can they not do it now? Like, what's changed?
I don't know. It's a wee bit of head scratcher because I think at least one of those players that you've mentioned suffers I think he suffers a little bit from some of the injuries that he picked up during his playing days. So Mickey Weir, I don't know about Graham Mitchell or Gordon Hunter. But sports science and physiotherapy and all that sort of stuff that goes into looking after players is much advanced since then. So, like, the players that Hibs had that you're talking about there didn't have, say, the benefit of the training centre that we do now.
Yeah.
And some of the facilities that they have. And you would like to think that, especially with some of the science that we were talking about, with the monitors that the player have, and, you can talk about, like, running at certain percentages or maximum, so on. You are able to closely monitor the health and well-being of a player far greater than you ever were then. But it seems like there were players that were doing far more then than are now. It seems, what's the word? Contradictory.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense.
No. And that's where I was going with that one, because it is early season, and that's why I'm loath to make excuses for it, is because, and I'm not saying it's right, this is the other thing, because there'll definitely be folk listening going, you're a fucking idiot, you didn't keep talking about, and I completely agree. I don't, that's why I'm asking the question rather than saying it as fact, right, because I don't know. I just think it's worth exploring. But in days gone by, like, you make a great point, training centre, so the players of today have all these advantages. Even the players of today didn't get tackled in the way that, like, Mickey Weir or Keith Wright got tackled. And you watch footage on YouTube of some of the old derbies, and it's just players smashing each other for 90 minutes. Like, there's red card tackles in those games that wouldn't get fucking, they didn't get a booking in them. They're just like, play on. Sometimes if we used to even blown for free kicks, whereas now you put your hands on somebody, they fall down, free kick, right? So you've got players who are putting up with shite pitches, no training centre, no squad rotation, so they're not getting the chance to rest. They've no nutritionists, right? They're all out in the piss and eating fucking fish suppers.
3 subs rather than 5.
3 subs is it? Well, 2 subs. 2 subs gone back if you go back long enough.
2 subs if you go.
Like,
okay, so we're going to start talking about 2 points for a win in a second.
I know, we're a lad. And but they never had all these advantages, but they coped with the demands of these games, and they got through it, and there wasn't that kind of talk about it. And no doubt players got tired and stuff, but they still were expected to perform. And yet we're talking about a Sunday, Thursday at the start of the season, like I say, with good weather. Pitches are all brilliant. Like, you saw Easter Road on Thursday night, immaculate. Fir Park today was immaculate. I don't get why we can't field our best 11 in consecutive games. Why we have to chop and change it and compromise to the extent that you put a team out today that looked like they'd never met each other. Like, they played today like we had never met each other. It was fucking awful.
It was a dreadful game. It was. I did take some notes from the first half, and if you bear with me 1 second, I'll bring them up on my phone and I'll share them with you. Scrappy, lots of head tennis, lack of width, frustrating slack passes.
Yeah.
And to be fair, I think that was, if I was to build on that and go into a summary of the game, I think that was largely the 90 minutes, and the only real difference, I think, between the two sides was that Motherwell were able to carve out 2 chances and we couldn't.
Yeah, and that's
It
it's
was
not
a shit game of football.
it's not like Motherwell were peppering our goal. And I saw that on Hibs night. Somebody says get Stuart Kettlewell in because he outsmarted or had Lee Johnson's number of the day. I don't think Motherwell did. I think Motherwell capitalised on two fucking horrendous mistakes for us. So for the first goal, Stevenson gets caught wrong side of the player, out muscled. He couldn't get back, and it's not often Lewis gets out muscled by someone. He's quite a strong wee character, but the
I
boy,
think. Sorry, I was just going to talk about Stevenson. Sorry, Stevenson for a second there. I think the mistake, if you like, that he made was very similar to when he got beaten by Gary Mackay-Steven at Easter Road a couple of years ago. Aberdeen Hibs, Aberdeen won 1-0. I think Stevenson made like a half step forward at the wrong opportunity. Gary Mackay-Steven got in behind him, and that was it. That was the only
yeah,
That was another dreadful game of football. That was the only mistake that happened. I think Stevenson gets caught ever so slightly on the wrong side of. I think their player was Mika,
yeah.
who just out muscles him. Like Stevenson just wasn't able to get goal side of him. That was that.
So they took advantage there. And even he squares it to a guy that's got three Hibs players around him, and the boy strokes it into the net. Terrible defending. Shit goal to lose. The second goal, though, was, I mean,
Awful.
absolute criminal. Was and on the radio they were giving Lennon Miller credit for a great pass through. He's passed it to Will Fish. Will Fish is in possession of the ball and in control of that situation, and we managed to concede from that. It was just, I mean, he struggled for words at how bad that bit of defence. That was every bit as bad as Tynecastle in his first game when he played right back and he tried to shepherd the ball out and got caught out. If not worse, he's in control of that situation and we concede a goal from it. I just thought it was,
Yeah, when you put it like that, I would say that it's as bad. I was going to say it was very close, but it was probably splitting hairs. But when you talk about how in control he was of that situation, he was absolutely in control of both situations, and in both situations, it's cost us a goal.
yeah. And I suppose it's the level we're at. You know, like in top flight Scottish football, is as much as folk decry it, you can't get away with mistakes like that. You'll get
No.
punished for them, as we saw today. And then to compound it, we just offered nothing going forward. I mean, we got a wee bit lucky with the penalty. It was definitely a penalty. The boy's hands up above his head when Doidge heads
Mhm.
it. And Lafondra took the penalty well. I thought like he struck it very well, very comfortable penalty. But it was at that point everybody sort of lost interest. Half the folk had gone home.
Even my Fire Stick had lost interest. It started buffering at that point.
Aye.
So I think the penalty was taken in about the 94th minute. I was still seeing it in the 102nd.
Well, I've advocated this before. The referees should be able to get the fourth official to put a number of minutes up that they're taking off the game rather than adding on for injury, just to do everybody a fucking favour. Do you know they go right like this? It's like, how would you class it? Like just shite game time. Like that's it. We've got a minimum of 4 minutes of shite game time, which means you're only playing 41 minutes that half. They put the board because it just does everybody a favour. You're great. We can go home and we can stop watching it because today was a game like that. And the other thing, at one point, I thought I might run on the pitch and get one of these 10-year banning orders. Like,
So I never have to see this again.
it felt that seemed like a plausible option at that moment in time. If I hadn't been so far back up in the stand that it would have necessitated like having to shuffle past folk and then go down all the stairs, jump over the hoarding. That was the biggest factor that put me off. Like it was going to inconvenience me and others.
Was
And
that one of those moments where you stopped listening to your inner thoughts?
yeah, it'd be one of these ones like, can you go, you rock up at court and you're going, fucking please give me the 10-year ban order, 10-year ban order. And they go, right, why did you do it? And you say, the game is shite and I wanted to be banned for football. And they go, right, your punishment is you've got to attend all Hibs Motherwell games for the next 10 years. And you go, oh, fucking hell. Including reserves and youth teams and all the rest of it. Like, that's it. That's your effective banning order. But
It somehow doesn't seem enough. It seems like the judge should probably give you more. Not more games, but maybe it'd be better off sending you to, I don't know, I was going to say a Hearts game.
Well, come on, like, we've all had a drink, John. Let's not say something we might regret. Right, well, I don't know what else there is to say about the game. Right, we'll go into the talking points from for our listeners. I just, do you know what? I said it last week when I can't remember if it was extra time or when we were talking about the game last week. This was another game when I'm sitting going, I'm sick of watching this level of performance. I was like genuinely going, I'm fucking sick of seeing us not being able to get a shot on target. Sick of seeing us not being able to form an attack
Yep,
and be
yep.
just huffing and puffing against a fucking shite. And no disrespect to Motherwell, or I disrespect to Motherwell. Motherwell are shite, right? St Mirren are shite. We are shite as well, and that's the bit that I'm sick of. I'm sick of us
Well,
being like,
I don't know. I was having a think there. I think one of the problems that we had against Motherwell today, performance aside, is that they were very organised.
mhm.
I think they set themselves out to be difficult to break down, and we've struggled against teams like that historically who do that. But I don't think that you could lay that criticism at St Mirren's door. I think St Mirren were just better than us on the day. So that's two different styles of football that we've come up against that we've been unable to compete with over 90 minutes. The only difference, of course, is the game against Lucerne where we looked very good.
Yeah,
At least in the second half. The first half was kind of even. Second half we looked very good. Scored three
I,
goals.
I thought first half we looked good against Lucerne as well. To be fair, like they were a good team. Like, they were better than Motherwell, better than St Mirren,
Aye,
and you know.
and it's bizarre when you start talking about things like that. You go, oh, like maybe there's hope for us yet.
Do you know, like, and we're going to talk about the European game on extra time, right? So for subscribers, after we finish recording this, we'll record our extra time episodes, right? So if anybody wants to listen to that, you can just click on our Twitter bio and follow the link, and you can sign up. Um, but we'll talk about that, and I dare say we'll talk about it with some optimism, which is just mental, really, because of what we've just witnessed. But it is just like this was an easy start for us this like easy in inverted commas this season. You looked at the like a favourable Conference League draw with Inter the Escalades, and we managed to fuck up a bit of that, right? Albeit we got through in the end, right? We still managed to get a bloodied nose in that fight where we really shouldn't have. And then St Mirren and Motherwell, which were two very, very winnable games on paper, and we've got 0 points for them.
Do you want to know what will further compound your confusion
Mm-hmm.
and possibly some of our listeners? Is that Inter Enchilada are ranked higher than Lucerne by UEFA's coefficient,
That is mental.
which makes me wonder where, based on their performances and victories against us in the last couple of weeks, where St Mirren and Motherwell would go, and how it is over the course of a season that Hibs found themselves in Europe, competing against these two clubs. And is it? And should we perhaps look at things without out with the lens of two games and say seasons are 38 games long, judges at the end of it?
Well, of course you should, right? But that would mean, John, that we would do one podcast a season. Right? And some folk might think that's a great idea, but we would do one a season. At the end of the season, went right. We finished fifth. What did you think? Whereas, you know, like we can only judge it on what we've seen as the season goes, right? And obviously our views change as the season goes, and we might well finish above St Mirren and Motherwell. In fact, I'd be fucking amazed if we don't, right? But on the evidence of the last two games, the last two league games, I would not be confident of us finishing top 8, never mind top 6.
Do you remember we used to do Snack of the Week?
Yeah.
And last week, I think it was on extra time, I described some of the football under Lee Johnson as being cheese and ham sandwiches.
Yeah.
Could we introduce a Hibs football flavour of the week? Because the reason I mention this is that this is because yesterday I had a chicken cup of soup and it was fucking dreadful. And I think it was as good as today's Hibs performance. And I'd like to try and keep that going on for every game that we play.
Yep. So against Lucerne, that what flavour was that?
Croque Monsieur.
Excellent. Right.
Fancy ham and cheese.
Yeah. So we're going for ham and cheese to croque monsieur and to chicken cup of soup.
Boggin chicken cup of soup.
Was that own brand cup of soup or was it Bachelor's or?
I'll need to go check. I'll report back because I wouldn't want to call it out and say it was Bachelor's because there's every chance it was store brand.
Right. Okay. I think I'm all for that, John. I think we can quite easily.
I think that would present a nice graph throughout the course of the season.
Aye.
Like the high points and low points.
Because there definitely will be some fillet steaks in the season. Do you know what I mean? Like Hibs are that sort of team that we will have some.
See if we're clever about this, we'll get filet mignon with the Italian chef thing going on.
It's the Kraft cheesy pasta this week. Fuck's sake. Right. Jeff Ashton's got the first comment this week. He says, not unexpected, to be honest. Newell needs a rest, miles off it, and without Yuan and Boyle, we are so easy to defend against. The game had 0-0 written all over it until we decided to gift some goals. Thursday is an even bigger one now.
Yep. I mentioned that in my notes. No width in the game. I don't think that Obita really offered a hell of a lot. And I think there was whatever was going on around on the right-hand side. I think maybe Jago was trying to help support Miller getting forward. Didn't really work out.
No, we didn't get anything from our right players today. I found that really frustrating and really disappointing. But then I also found the tactic of shelling the ball into the centre half's heads quite disappointing as well.
Yep. It's such a weird thing in football that we would do that because generally speaking, defenders are quite tall. So why would you just lump balls? Ever?
Yeah. And especially with nobody around Deutsch to pick up the second ball, which was just...
It's been a complaint for a while.
Yeah.
I'm thinking back to Jack Ross days that I remember us having that discussion about no one supporting.
It's brutal. Right, Andrew McBee said, ref, book him for being shite. Name the Hibs player the Motherwell fan was referring to.
Jago.
It genuinely could have been any of them today.
I think Jago sticks out because I think in all his games so far, he's kind of been a central midfielder, but he was, if I'm right, I think he was being asked to play a slightly unconventional role today. Sort of right midfield, but no really.
I noticed at one point he was man marking somebody, just like sort of followed them about for a wee bit. I forgot to pay attention to see whether that continued through the game.
Was it man marking or was it kind of like admirer?
No, proper. I'll go with you go type marking because I clocked it. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if he's if that's been part of our tactic. But then I kind of lost. Either he never did it again, or I forgot to keep paying attention to it. And I suspect probably the latter. Because the game was that bad. I clocked at one point, like Motherwell's main stand, not the one with all the fans in it, the ones with like just a few fans. The stand comes about, I don't know, 2/3 of the way up the pitch.
Yeah.
But the support.
It's got like a wee rock garden or something.
They've got like a wee bit for the TV camera and that to win it. But the supporting stanchion goes all the way up.
Mm-hmm.
It's full length. It's like they've gone, they build the frame of a stand, and then they've got 2/3 of the way up and went, I'm not getting any more money. We'll just end it here. Should we not finish it up to the end? No, we'll just we'll just have 2/3 of a stand.
It'll add character, trust me.
Aye. So I spent a bit of time looking at that and just thinking, how did that happen? Was that design, or did they just run out of cash, or have they added the support after the event because the stand looks quite old? It looks like it's not the sort of stand that would have that sort of support. And then the floodlights came on and I watched them warm up for a wee while as well. And I know you shouldn't really look directly at the light, but again, that was more preferable than watching what was happening on the pitch.
Less painful.
Yeah, right, Jake Gappers.
7,000 watts of power burned into your retina.
Staring right at them. I wouldn't recommend it. Jake Gapper said, this will probably rile a fair few folk up, but a lot of folk tipping St Mirren, Motherwell and Killie to do really well this season. While I agree we should be beating St Mirren at home, are we guilty of expecting wins against Motherwell away? We've only lost 3 out of the last 22.
That's a good point. I find it difficult whenever we say things like we should be beating St Mirren, we should be beating Motherwell, because they are professional football teams that are competing in the same league as us. You can start factoring in things like finances and what have you. But you could also, so you could say, I know that we've talked about it before, you could say that we will spend more money and have a greater budget than Motherwell or St Mirren. However, so our players should be better than theirs, but our players are better than theirs over the course of the season, and that's why we're in Europe and they're not.
That sounds awfully like common sense, John. Right. AKA Rab, I'm going to move on for that because I want to argue with you, but I think it's actually a fairly valid point. We should beat them. Like, we should. Like, I just like.
You could also look at it and say, right,
it's the same argument as why we shouldn't beat Celtic and Rangers. Like, it'll happen now and again that we do beat them, but 90 times out of 100 almost, they'll beat us because the players cost a lot more.
If you take the start of season 23-24 as a starting point, we've had 2 games, but 1 game each against Mirren and Motherwell. You could say, right, so we've got a possibility of, assuming St Mirren and Motherwell reach the top 6, we've got 12 possible points against them, and we now only have a possible 9. So you maybe look at all those games over the course of a season, find out where you stack up.
Yeah,
and at the all we have at the moment, like, and I'm trying not to have that sort of knee-jerk reactionary thing that you talked about before, but at the moment, is disappointing as it is, we've lost 2 games. There's 36 to go. There's potentially another 3 against those opposition, where we could improve upon this on these opening day results.
Yeah, and you're right, and I'm being knee-jerk about it because I was fucked off. But I'm quite happy to concede that point, John. I think you're right.
It would be nothing. We wouldn't be worth listening to if there wasn't a dissenting point of view.
Yeah, you're right. Right, AKA Rab says, I don't understand the need to be resting first-team players this early in the season. With the exception of Boyle, everyone should be good to go. I'm pretty over LJ's pattern now too. It's just lots of words with very little substance. I don't know if you caught any of Johnson's interview on the radio or on Sports Scene.
I didn't, unfortunately. I did try to try and listen before I got on. I was scouring Twitter for a frantic 5 minutes beforehand.
I think there was potentially 2 or 3 words that were completely made up, and definitely 1 or 2 that were close to the word that he was going for. I always know what he means, right? And I have to say that I folk slaughter Lee Johnson for the way that he talks. I always know what he's meaning. When he say that, I always get what he's trying to say. I personally don't mind it, and I wouldn't slaughter him for it. But this, lots of words with very little substance. There's definitely some of that creeping in after each of the defeats. At least today, he didn't lay the blame on the players today. He also didn't take responsibility. He just pointed to the fact that he couldn't pick the team that he wanted to pick.
Aye. So I think at the start of the game, when I saw the starting lineup, I think Hibs had mentioned that there was 3 changes. So Yuan was mentioned as having a minor injury. Boyle was replaced by, keep me right here, because there was 3 and I couldn't work them all out at the time.
So the changes were Obita, Jego, and Doige started for Lafondre, Boyle, and Yuan.
Yeah. So I think the only one that was mentioned, the only one that we were properly missing was Yuan, because they were resting him presumably with one eye on Thursday coming up. Boyle, medical advice. I find that a bit curious.
So I think they said that ideally he wouldn't have played because the strain on his legs, effectively. Like if he could have given him no minutes today, then he would have given him no minutes. But he had to play him.
Yeah. So, I mean, that. Do we find ourselves in a lack of squad depth situation again? or is it just? Does that mean that we're one-dimensional through unfortunate circumstances because of poor recruitment and squad depth?
Aye.
Like
So,
how is it we have two wingers, two wide players, and the loss of them makes Hibs so one-dimensional? What is the cause of that?
well, that is so. We let Dan Mackay go to Livingston, so he would have been a wide player. Tavares was signed, and he's clearly no good
Kicking his
enough.
heels on Portobello Beach.
But still picking up by all accounts a fairly decent wage for it. You can't spend that wage twice, so that we're hamstrung by that. And then you've got injuries to take into consideration as well, right? And I get that, like injuries happen. It's unfortunate when they happen. So like Marshall maybe wouldn't have played if Walcott wasn't injured. Abita might be a little bit further forward in his match readiness had he not been injured in pre-season. Campbell and Jake Doyle Hayes would have played today, but they both were injured. So you get there's injuries, and the squad depth thing definitely comes into it. The one-dimensional bit, again, I think that's on the manager. They have to deal with the hands you've got, don't you? Like that's it. You can't just go, well, that's the way that we play, and if we've not got the players for it, we're going to play that way anyway and hope it works. You need to change
Yeah,
what you're doing.
I'd like to know more about that medical advice as well. So ideally, Martin Boyle would have played 0 minutes today,
Mm-hmm.
but I'd like to know how that progresses. So at the moment, we had a game on Thursday, game today. We have a game on Thursday, presumably another game on Sunday. How does that impact on Martin Boyle and the amount of time that he's allowed on the pitch? Because if he's ideally going to have 0 minutes following the Thursday game, and you'd like to think that Hibs are going to progress to Europe, and we're going to talk about that in extra time, into the qualification stages, does that leave us short on the right hand side because of his return to fitness? And we had like what's the replacement on the right hand side there? Because it's clearly not Jego allowing
No,
Lewis
Miller.
Miller to get forward.
No. So you could put Yuan on the right hand side and play Obita on the left. That's
Right.
one option for it, I suppose. We've seen Deutsch go out on the left hand side. When was that against the Inter, or might be actually against St Mirren? Deutsch,
Oh, when he scored the ball for Lafondra.
running up the left hand side. I don't suppose
I'd love
anybody's
to see.
preferred
I'd
option,
love
but
to see Deutsch left wing.
Deutsch and left wing. I mean, I don't know. We are lacking depth. We're lacking quality. When our main players are out of contention. Right, Andrew Brown says it's like Groundhog Day. Another game, another abject performance. After 3 windows, almost 15 months in charge, have we really seen a difference? The squad LG inherited couldn't been that bad as he's still playing the majority of them. Look what Mowbray did in the summer after joining. That's a good point. Mowbray and Stubbs, you could probably both point to as being managers that very quickly put together a decent squad. So the idea that a manager needs 2 or 4 or 4 or 5 transfer windows probably gets blown out the water.
Yeah, I think who did Mowbray follow? Was it Williamson?
Williamson, aye. And
I mean,
Mowbray did
things
it on a
were.
shoestring as well.
Yeah,
I nearly said shoespring there, Rich. I don't know what a shoestring is.
it's something to Inspector Gadget, is it? No?
Yes.
Go Gadget jumpy shoes. I'm just trying to think. Like the two managers you mentioned there followed up to poor managers. Mowbray followed up Williams, or at least maybe not poor managers, but certainly poor results. And Stubbs followed up Butcher, and Hibs got relegated under Butcher. So
Yeah.
like things couldn't have really gotten much worse at that point. So would anything at that point have been an improvement? Mowbray definitely had more exciting football for a period, and he did it in the top flight. Stubbs remained in the Championship, won the Scottish Cup, and bowed out.
Yeah.
So I think it's useful to look at those things objectively and say it wasn't quite the amazing transformation that we perhaps look back on it fondly as being.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, that's true. But we played for most of the Stubbs' time, we played decent football. We just struggled. Like, well, I suppose we had games like we had today, didn't we, where we got stuck. Like we couldn't break teams down, and then we made a stupid mistake and got punished for it. All right, Craig Hendry said, "Is it worth getting into Europe if this is what we get at the weekend? Our squad just doesn't have the depth, quality-wise, to cope. It seems."
That's funny because when we were talking about that European hangover, I thought that perhaps one of the solutions might be is that if we ever get into Europe, we just sit quietly. We just enjoy it as if we're watching something at the cinema, and then wait until the final whistle's gone before we get up and start applauding because we really enjoyed what we saw.
They do, so we could do that. Um,
That's a radical approach. Don't get me wrong, but
it is a radical approach. Well, Colin got a bit of stick last season for saying like the fifth place in the European slot is almost like a what's he call it, the race to embarrassment or something. I think he said. Whereas you play all season, you get this European game. The European games come around and you're not equipped for it, so you get either scalped and you get a stupid result against an Andorran team and have everybody taking the piss at you, or you're not ready for the league because you can't cope on all fronts. And it's almost like a year as well, just fucking finishing sixth and going, oh, okay, we'll just have a higher finish next season and go for fourth. I think you'd rather have the European football, wouldn't you? And then hopefully next season you're better equipped than we were this season because we've learnt a bit from it. And if you do that consistently, you eventually build up a squad and an experience to be able to cope with it.
I know the figures are bandied around, and I must admit I don't pay attention to them too much. But I think, or I'm led to believe that every round that you progress through, up until the group stage, is worth around about is it about 500,000 maybe in the next round, next
About that,
game.
I think, yeah.
And I wonder how much difference it would make for progression through the League Cup and the Scottish Cup, and if it's worthwhile focusing on them to try and help fund a European adventure for some point in the future, because we're obviously missing League Cup football at the moment because we're competing in Europe. But the teams that we're then playing against in the league seem to be up to a greater speed than we are for our European adventure that could be over very, very soon. So you're just always stuck in this. Like if we were to finish fifth this year and qualify for Europe again, does that mean that we are stuck in a shitty sort of situation next year?
Aye, we have the same again.
For never being able to progress.
Well, I think until you can break through to the group stages, that's where the European football really becomes valuable for a club like Hibs because you're then making millions. I think when you're making under $1 million, it's good for the experience, it's good for profile, but it's not a huge like financial windfall for us.
Imagine a lot of it will probably be swallowed up by cost as well, because obviously it'll not cost nothing to get somewhere on, I don't know, charter flights or turboprops or whatever it happens to be.
Turbo props. Andrew McBee said, anyone ever seen any evidence of this consistently? And he's put a quote here from Lee Johnson, which I shall read out for the benefit of the listeners. As a manager, I like to turn up the attacking dial during the game, and I want to play a high-tempo brand of football. Whatever formation we play, I will make sure my team is consistent in our playing style, aggressive and on the front foot. What you will get from me is I will try and win every game. I guarantee you that. Sometimes to our detriment, but I guarantee you will go to the big boys, be aggressive, and try to win every football match. So have we seen evidence of that consistently from Lee Johnson's Hibs side? What a question that is.
No, we've not seen it.
It's an easy answer. It's a good question, but it's an easy answer. No, we've no.
I think if you were to, I'd love that question to be put to Lee Johnson now and ask him to respond. I think, is it fair? Because I think it is fair. Because if we were to say something outrageous in the podcast, we've got listeners, we've got people that pay to listen to us, and if we were to say something outrageous or contradictory or something that we couldn't back up, they would say to us, "That's pish."
Yeah.
So is it only fair, therefore, that someone was to put that to Lee Johnson and say, what happened?
Well, as always, if anybody for Hibs is listening, we do have an open invitation to get Lee Johnson on. We'd quite happily put that question to him and others. Yeah, we'd love to do that, and it's definitely a question that I would be putting forward, John.
P.S. We would also like to know your favourite type of soup.
Yeah, that's also yeah, Lee. If you were to describe your your overall time at Hibs as a food flavour, are you more craft cheesy pasta, or are you more what was your steak one, John?
Filet mignon.
Filet mignon, uh, or somewhere in between? Are you a chicken
By
cuppers?
the way, I don't even know what filet mignon is.
Well,
I just know it's something,
he
something
was
fancy that I can't afford.
he was centre forward for Newcastle under Kevin Keegan. Uh, Jake Gapper said hindsight and all that, but would the home game against Wraith Rovers next weekend not have been a better opportunity to rest so many players? Yes, probably. Although I wouldn't take Wraith lightly either. Stephen Bell said I'm Stevenson's biggest fan, but a better option starting at left back has to be near the top of the priority list now, surely. As it stands, we pretty much have one fit left back, Stevenson, and one fit right back in Miller. How has he failed to address this issue this window? And I think that's a good question. Like the whole bit. Like, so I think a left back definitely has to be priority. Like has to be. You can't. Stevenson's not started the season particularly well. He was good on Thursday night, but I think he's had a mistake in him in every game, and today's mistake cost us a goal. But I just think in general, like for a player at Stevenson's stage of his career, is it fair to ask him to put in every game like that level of performance Sunday Thursday all season? Probably not. You would want to have somebody else coming in to play at left back.
I take exception at Stephen's question because I think I'm Stevenson's biggest fan. But no, I'm thinking. I don't know if you remember when Maybury played under Fenlon. I don't think Maybury was ever meant to play the number of games that he played. I think he was here in a sort of coaching capacity, but still retained his player registration. And I know that I know that Stevenson isn't playing for Hibs in that capacity, but at 35, pushing 36, starting left back with no real sort of alternative behind him, it's like there's only so many times we can have this conversation about Stevenson. Like I say, like there's a lot of Hibs fans that are huge fans of Stevenson, but we can't keep having this conversation. Like we've had the same conversation for about the last 3 years. When's someone going to replace him? When's someone going to
Yeah.
replace him? And I think the longer we have that conversation, the more the more glaring potentially the mistakes that Stevenson makes are, the less, and it's not necessarily his fault that he's playing. Like he's the one that's selected to play.
Mm-hmm.
It's that there's no replacement. So it's almost like it almost feels at the moment that Stevenson could do whatever the hell he wants at left back. He can make whatever mistake he wants to make. There's no one there to replace him.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the reluctance is, and this isn't a criticism of Stevenson's either. I don't know what the reluctance is to have someone play ahead of him. So if it's that you don't trust the understudy, so we gave Josh Doig time to come in and get game time, and Stevenson acted as a mentor for him. Great. There should have been someone else following that up. And I can't remember, it's one of the McIntyre brothers. He should be getting some game time to start bringing him up to speed, because I think what you don't want to happen is for someone like Steve. I think Stevenson would be a good mentor, but I don't think you want to find yourself in a situation where Stevenson just stops playing and that's it, and there's no one there to guide him.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, no one there to guide the replacement.
Well, I agree, and again, good question, and I think for all people rightly defend Stevenson because of his history with the club, but I think it's absolutely fair to have the conversation as you would with any other player. Right, Paul, 1875 said, why can we blow a very decent Swiss team away on Thursday, play a bang average Premiership team and get beat? Johnson has been hugely backed by the board, but I see absolutely no improvement from last season. The same lame excuses from him as well. I think we've spoken about that. Pete said, so obviously the manager gets the game on Thursday, but if we fail to go through, is it time to pull the trigger? And if we do go through, do we persevere? And that leads on to John Doherty's question, which is how much longer can Johnson get away with it? So if we go out on Thursday, John, from a commanding 3-1 position, maybe this is again something we'll talk about a bit more in extra time. Is that it? Is it Jota's time?
I don't know. I wonder what. I'm curious as to what the conversations behind the scenes at Easter Road would have been like. So, with regards to today, with Martin Boyle, the medical advice, Ely Yuan, the minor injury that they had, I wonder how much Hibs are putting into getting into the next round, looking at the potential monetary reward of the tie against Aston Villa, and as much as it's going to be a stretch, I think, to beat them over two legs, what could potentially await us in the group stages.
Mm-hmm.
I know that doesn't answer the question, but if Hibs were to get through against Lucerne, Johnson stays. Again, like I don't think that the Hibs board are going to say you need to beat Aston Villa over two legs. So I think that's an almost impossible task, given the vast gulf of wealth between the two sides.
Yeah.
If he loses against Lucerne, I think I don't know. I genuinely don't know, because I wonder if the Hibs board are as conflicted as some of the Hibs fans are with regards to, do we keep him or do we let him go? Because some results, good, got into Europe, got us that far. Other results, not so good.
Yeah. Carl said, starting Diego and relying on bringing Henderson on to change the game highlights the work still needed to be done to the squad. Neither are anywhere near good enough. Ladij said, no shots on goal. Parmaham 2 said, squad's not deep enough or talented enough, and Johnson's hopeless. Michael Donachie said, 2 so-called winnable games lost. Wait till October, which is, of course, when the tough games come in. Or the again, in inverted commas, because they all look like they're tough at the minute. Belgium Lascar said, Leon said, are we living in the footballing equivalent of Groundhog Day? Fans wanting a manager sacked early into the start of the season.
We talked about Groundhog Day during Shortbangers, and I think someone mentioned that Bill Murray lived the same day for 34 years.
Yeah.
Like, it feels like we've been having this conversation, like we've been having this 18-month cycle of Hibs managers for 34 years.
Do you think there are any other podcasts, even perhaps one that's dedicated to the film Groundhog Day, that has mentioned Groundhog Day more frequently than ours has?
I like to think that the Groundhog Day podcast references Longbangers referencing the Groundhog Day podcast. The film, sorry.
See, if we did a Groundhog Day podcast, John, right? So hear me out here. Considering doing one, right? Would you do one and then just release the same episode every week?
We fucking should. we could just I don't know, what would that look like? Would it just be our critique of the film or our thoughts about certain aspects of it and just have that out every week?
We could. I wonder if it would be one of these ones that would be, you know, like sometimes we quirky things like that become like almost cult-like and folk buy into it just because it's so ridiculous. I wonder if
I was going to say there's a Twitter account that I follow, and since Elon Musk got involved, I don't know if it's still active, but all it would do is tweet the lyrics to "The Boys Are Back in Town" by Thin Lizzy, and I fucking loved it.
Excellent. Well, that's the same kind of idea, isn't it? Right, Hans said, sit out for a point, no width with two powder puff wing backs going forward, no style of play relying on long throws, which makes it a 50-50 ball. Yep. Harbottle got to be sitting there thinking, am I that bad I can't get a game over this? That was from Wayne Clark. Elston Loon said, I asked Will Fish last week and you covered it during your discussion, but I'll ask again. Will Fish? He's not had a great start to the season, by the way.
Nah.
Folk are quick to hammer Hanlon, but Hanlon, I think, has started the season better than Will Fish has.
I think it's fair. I don't think Harbottle will start against Lucerne. However, if Fish puts in similar sorts of performances as he has over the first couple of games of the season, then Harbottle's got to be getting a look in, regardless of who Will Fish's parent club is. what it comes down to is ability and decision making on the pitch. Or sorry, performances and decision making on the pitch. And Wolfishes could have been better so far.
Yeah. Right, we're running out of time, so just could rattle through the last 4 or 5 points here. Right, again, for Elliston and Loon, how glad am I that I couldn't go as my daughter is being picked up for Berwick train station. She'll receive my thanks. I think out of 15, you're probably 15 out of 15 glad. Dave asked, can we all consider Stephen Robinson as a manager? So he would definitely be one that I would look at if we were replacing Lee Johnson.
I don't know. It's hard to be drawn on it because I think we've tried. It feels like we've tried every angle on Hibs managers, inexperienced, experienced, different leagues, different countries. Doesn't seem to have worked.
Jane said, so boring. I left at the second goal. Worst part is Motherwell were awful too. We were just worse. Braden said 90 minutes to have one shot on target. Deserved the sack on the spot. Fraser Kirkpatrick said, Jago, what did he actually do today? Cammy Fife said, I can't wrap my head around this so-called European hangover. Are we unfit or is it psychological or just shit? And Sideshow Bob said, who's our next manager going to be? Yeah, I think your pick. Derek McInnes is another one that I saw heavily touted on Hibs.net for the next manager, and I think in days gone by I probably would have been quite heavily against the idea of Derek McInnes, but I've probably warmed to the idea now, if I'm totally honest.
Do you know, maybe we need to move the conversation forward and put a different slant on it and say that we need a manager who's got experience of the Thursday-Sunday rotation of European and domestic football. Because to the best of my knowledge, I don't think Lee Johnson's got any experience of European football.
No, this is his first foray into Europe as a manager with Hibs.
Touch wood, he's got, what has he got? 2 out of 3 games? 1, 2 out of 3?
Yeah, it's not bad. And, he's got a cracking chance of progressing. We'll talk about that in a minute on extra time. Again, just to be reminded, if you want to listen to us talking about or previewing, I suppose, the European game on Thursday, that you can subscribe from as little as £2 per month. It's not a lot, John, is it? £2?
That was very nicely delivered, Matty, can I say?
I know. And there's a lot of content. You get all our old content as well, like all the old extra times, and there's some cracking episodes in there to go back to. So we'll go talk about that just now. I think just before we close up this one, I bought a ticket to go today, knowing full well what was going to happen. Right? I don't think there are many Hibs fans that weren't expecting a fucking shit game or a shit result today. Do you know what I mean? It was. I didn't maybe expect it to be quite as bad as it was, but I definitely thought the day was one that we were probably going to get beat. It probably wasn't going to be very good because of what happened on Thursday night. And I try not to get too annoyed about it because I did have that expectation, but I'm still annoyed about it.
How different do you think you might have felt going into Fir Park today if we'd just come off the back of a defeat against St Mirren without the highlight of Lucerne midweek?
I would have been expecting us to bounce back. That's like you probably go, it's a wee opportunity to put it right, and you've had the teams had a week to kind of go and work on the deficiencies and that. So I would have expected, or at least hoped for a win today. There's a guy, Gogs, that does one of the Motherwell podcasts or a YouTube channel, and he'd messaged me before the game, and I'd replied to him saying that I can use a win by a couple of goals today. Just that's kind of how I thought it would go. I shouldn't have been surprised. I shouldn't have let it get to me. But it is still annoying, isn't it?
Yep.
Right. And on that note, then, thanks everybody for all the talking points and brilliant ones there. Keep them coming. If there's anything particularly like us to cover, please do get in touch and we will do our best to cover it. Thanks for tuning in. And we will see you next time. Well, they trailed me down when I broke free. I drank all the whiskey in Tennessee. I don't drink what I know.